What's going on? It's the Rap Nerd, and I am here today to talk about my experience with anime as a black man. Now, this sparked from this tweet right here that I'll put, and this is by no means me attacking this guy because I feel like everything is a matter of perspective, and I'm just here to give my perspective on this subject of black folks in anime. Now, here he is talking about how he feels that anime has only been accepted by black folks overall within the last years. He said recent years. I'm not really 100% sure what he's counting as recent, but if I had to guess, it sounds like he's saying the last decade. And again, not trying to refute his claims, but reading that, it kind of felt odd because he was saying that prior to this decade, him growing up in the hood, he was beat up and picked on because of liking anime. And I read that kind of scratching my head like, I didn't get that experience, and that's why I'm here today. Again, just offering perspective because, whenever I see somebody throw a blanket statement over something that I'm also included in, I feel like it is just in my heart and my mind to kind of give my thoughts on that perspective, just to add something different because nothing is ever black and white. And that's one thing that social media is done a really bad job at presenting, not just saying him, but everything is always black and white. So this is just my perspective, all right? I am 36. I'm from a place called Columbia, South Carolina. So my experience is from a regular suburban city. I'm not from no big city like New York or Atlanta or LA, any of that. So for me personally, anime has been a part of my life since I was about 9 or 10, back in 4th, 5th grade. And I've always been a follower of anime in some regard. That was 26 years ago, so that lands at 1998, and this is just going to be me going through my experiences with anime from that age on. So, in 1998, me being a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, somewhere, in that gap, around that time period is when anime really hit the US extremely hard. And from that point on, it just grew into where it is today. Just having anime in theaters, it's just crazy to see where it's gone from. But I can definitely say, back then it hit hard. And the first wave of it was brought to me by another black kid, one of my best friends at the time. He's the one that put me on the anime. I never forget, he showed me a manga, and it blew my mind because it was black and white, and you read it in reverse. And the book was thick. It was like a graphic novel. And during that time period, the only thing that I knew about comic books were the issues from DC and Marvel, Superman, Batman, X-Men, Spider-Man, all these different characters. And, there were always these thin issues, and you had to keep buying them week by week to keep the story going. But this manga was just like a whole complete story on its own, and that part blew my mind as well. And just, looking at the artwork and just seeing how adult it was, it really, intrigued me a lot, which is another thing with anime, which I'll get into. So, and what he also had was this subtitled VHS tape of Dragon Ball. And I remember watching it just like, what is this? Like, this art, this animation, this action is way different than what I was used to with the American animation, like Batman animated series, Superman animated series, Spider-Man. Like, it was way different than how this looked, and even with the themes at play. So him introducing that to me, I asked him where he got it from, and that's when he took me to this store, kind of like FYE, I forgot the name of it, but they sell, music, posters, movies. It had all kind of media in there. And he brought me over and just showed me a line of anime tapes, and I was like, oh snap, this is pretty dope. And ironically, around this time, anime was already playing on TV, so he put me on game to that, and I started looking for it, and that's when I found that Dragon Ball Z was on Fox early in the morning.
Set a collision course with adventure as the Dragon Ball gang encounters giants and monsters.
Monsters?
Yes, monsters, as well as some of the most heinous villains in the entire universe. Did we mention Vegeta is back? It's action you don't want to miss as the search for the magical Dragon Balls continues. Watch Dragon Ball Z.
Sunday at 9:30 on WB50.
And Pokemon at the time first hit and was on every single morning.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test, to train them is my cause.
Do Ash and Mickey Misty have what it takes to be Pokemon Masters? Only if they can capture as many as possible while battling Team Rocket's treacherous tricks. Catch all the action, each day, right here.
Pokemon! Weekdays at 6:30 on Cruise 62.
And that was my first introduction into anime. And again, it was this thing of the art being so different. Dragon Ball Z being way more hardcore when it comes to its action. I mean, blood spill, people getting sawed in half, all type of shit that you do not see in Batman, Superman, or any of the superheroes cartoons. So you had that, and then you had Pokemon, which again handled its action way differently, the artwork being different. And back then I was super an artist. One of the reasons why I was so much into comic books, I wanted to be a cartoonist growing up, or a sketch artist growing up. So I was able to differentiate the different art between anime and American comic books, and it really intrigued me. And from that point on, I was always into anime. And when I went to school, Pokemon was the wave, bro. Everybody collected Pokemon cards. And I had a group of friends that were all black. We all played Pokemon cards. We all were trying to collect the holographic cards and battle and play games for keeps. I remember we were into Dragon Ball Z, and those were really the two things at the time that we all were into. And even when I met new people in different neighborhoods and all of that, people knew about Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. So it's never been at a point where it was bullying or picked on for being in the anime. And granted, you will have people who will retort that and say those are like the pretty much entry-level animes, but at the end of the day, back then, it just is what it was. We didn't know it was called anime. We just knew it was different. We just knew that this looked different than the American stuff that we're used to. We didn't learn it was anime until getting older. And one of the things that introduced us to the concept of what anime was and how it is was Toonami. This was 2000, and Toonami introduced Sailor Moon. It went through a rebrand because Toonami was around in the late 90s, but they were showing shows from like the 80s, like Voltron and He-Man and Thundercats. They were showing that kind of thing, and I really wasn't into that. But when they rebranded and brought Tom onto Toonami, that's when they introduced anime. And one of the first shows they had on there, I feel like it was the first block of the show when it aired in the daytime. I believe it was like from 4 to 6 is when they had it. And Sailor Moon was one of those shows that also opened the door to anime to expose our eyes to that. And from that point on, they just kept introducing more and more anime. And again, this is all in the 2000s, the early 2000s, from 2000 to like 2003. By this point, we had Sailor Moon, we had Ronin Warriors, Dragon Ball Z was a regular, Pokemon was still popping off, Inuyasha, Tenchi Muyo, Yu-Gi-Oh made its way into the mix, Digimon was on Fox. Like, there were a plethora of animes in the mix of regular cable TV and hell, even local TV at this point for people to sink their teeth in. So at no point was anime ever like the weird thing to get you bullied. And again, not saying that there's folks who got that treatment are wrong, but I'm just giving my experience and that we never experienced it. And I was a kid that was bullied. I used to be bullied for wearing glasses because glasses definitely weren't cool in the 90s, and I used to get picked on for pronouncing my words because that somehow meant I was trying to talk white, which is a whole other video that I can get into, which is crazy how that was a thing. But I'm just glad that both of those things are abolished. But I used to be picked on for those things, and not one of those times was it because I was into anime. If anything, from my experience, for the folks who didn't know what anime was, they kind of just left you alone. It's just kind of like, man, there's some stuff that I'm not, really into or whatever. But that was never like the target practice for bullying, in regards to anime. And since then, anime has only grown and grown and grown. Like, again, as a black person, it never was a thing that it was unacceptable. I mean, I knew gangbangers who followed Dragon Ball Z from top to bottom, who were actively going out and wanting to find the English subtitled movies. Dragon Ball GT was one of those things that was already created, and there were people going out finding it. And these are gangbangers, some of the hardest dudes I went to school with in high school. And granted, I graduated in 2006, so I'm literally seeing all of this unfold to where it is now. a lot of us learn how to draw because of our fascination with anime. And granted, again, Dragon Ball Z was probably the biggest head of that once, you know, you get into the 2000s, but other adult anime was also popping at the time. I remember coming to school and talking about Gundam Wing, having discussions about who our favorite Gundam pilots were and who had our favorite Gundams. Like, I was a huge fan of Death Scythe. I thought that this robot with his big scythe, and I thought that, I think his name is Duo, who piloted him, was dope. I remember having these discussions with plenty of people and talking about this. So for me personally, I don't know who else out there kind of can see eye to eye with me. It's always been accepted in the black community. You know, for me personally, I never ran into an issue to go into people getting bullied and picked on. Again, this is not to fire at somebody or say you're wrong, but I think one of the culprits there, that could be a culprit there, is the stereotype of nerds and, you know, how nerds are typically seen. You know, I think that's why that word is being rewritten so much in today's times, you know, with a lot of black folks and people of color throwing their stake in the claim of like, no, we've always been nerds too. Is that sometimes nerds being in their own space can be socially awkward because not only are they ostracized by people, but they kind of ostracize themselves knowing people aren't into the same things that they are. And one of the things that come with a stereotype is some nerds have a bad attitude. Not to say all, but some nerds have a bad attitude and developed kind of an asshole nature. So naturally, when somebody wants to bully you and pick on you, they're gonna go at what they see to throw it back in your face. So they might be like, get your nerdy ass on with them damn Pokemon cards or that anime bullshit. It's not necessarily a shot at that, it's a shot at the person using whatever they have to insult them. And I see a lot of folks taking that and running with it, you know, especially in the community. I've seen like a lot of black men saying there weren't black women or black girls back in the day who liked them for being nerds and looked at them weird for anime. And again, married with kids now, but back then I never had an issue talking to any girls when I loved anime. It just didn't happen for me. I mean, like, I feel like you either got swag or sauce or you don't, period. Don't blame it on something that you were into. It is what it is. I think trying to use that as an insult is just not the way to go about it, in my opinion, you know? Because being in the space that I am, I feel like personally, I am a very multifaceted, you know, individual, and I had friends from all walks of life, and some I introduced them to anime and they loved it, and the other ones I introduced and they was like, nah, I'm good on that. But it never was no type of beef or nothing. I think it just depends on the person you are and how you carry yourself. And the last thing I'll say to close this out is the gatekeeping is not necessary anyway. Part of this tweet and things that I've seen are people saying like, oh, people just got into anime. Nigga, that's fine. That's okay if somebody just stumbled across anime 10 years ago. It doesn't make them less of a fan or worse of an individual just because they weren't in the anime when you first was onto it. Again, I've been on anime since the late 90s. I don't look at somebody who just stumbled across it recently within the last decade or even the 2000s and be like, you're less of an anime fan than I am, and you weren't around when we went through the trenches of trying to get it. Stop. If you're into something, it should be welcome to any and everybody. It's okay if you were a black person who'd been in the anime and now you're seeing people just like it. That's fine. People have different hobbies. It's cool. Hold your horses. This is an unnecessary conversation to even be had anyway. So just had to state my piece there because I wanted to give the perspective of the other side of that tweet. That's what my channel is all about. It's about offering my personal perspective to help open your minds or see things a little bit differently. I am a Libra, so that's just part of what I do. And anyway, let me know what your experience was and is with anime, whether you're black, white, Asian, Latino. How did you stumble across anime and how was it growing up with it in your experiences? I want to hear from anybody who watches this video. And if you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you already are subscribed, thank you. And until next time, peace.
RapNerd Productions, no capping, that's word to mommy. Instead of banking on it, now rapping is just a hobby.